Have you ever noticed that your greatest enemy in life wears an invisible mask? It doesn't announce itself with fanfare or dramatic music. No, your greatest saboteur comes disguised as something so common, so accepted in our modern society, that we've been fooled into believing it's normal, even necessary. That disguise, my friend, is mental exhaustion. I've spent decades studying the minds of the most successful individuals across America and beyond. I've sat with titans of industry, innovative geniuses, and people who transformed themselves from poverty to prosperity. And I can tell you with absolute certainty, the difference between those who achieve greatness and those who merely dream about it often comes down to one critical factor: how they manage the silent saboteur of mental exhaustion. The statistics are staggering. The average American professional reports feeling mentally exhausted 3 out of 5 workdays. Nearly 78% of adults claim their mental fatigue prevents them from pursuing their deepest ambitions. And perhaps most alarming, studies reveal that mental exhaustion reduces your decision-making capacity by 40%. Nearly half of your mind's potential power silently stolen from you. But here's what you may find shocking. Mental exhaustion is rarely about how much you're doing. No, it's far more insidious than that. It's about how you're thinking about what you're doing. I remember meeting a young businessman in Chicago back in the 1930s. By all external measures, he was successful, owned a small manufacturing company, had a beautiful family, lived in a nice neighborhood, but when we spoke privately, he confessed he felt constantly drained, operating at half his potential, watching opportunities pass him by because he simply didn't have the mental energy to pursue them. "Mr. Hill," he said to me, "I feel like a man trying to run a race with invisible weights strapped to my ankles. Others seem to sprint ahead while I'm struggling just to lift my feet." 6 months after applying the principles I'm about to share with you, this same man had doubled his business, reported feeling more alive than he had in years, and most importantly, had recognized how the saboteur of mental exhaustion had been disguising itself in his life, robbing him of his birthright to achievement and satisfaction. What if I told you that most of what you believe about mental energy is completely backward? What if the very things you're doing to rest your mind are actually depleting it further? What if the solutions to mental fatigue aren't about working less but thinking differently? In this video, I'm going to reveal the hidden mechanisms behind mental exhaustion, not as modern psychology understands it, but as I've observed it in the lives of hundreds of extraordinary achievers across decades of research. I'll show you why willpower alone will never be enough to overcome this saboteur, and why most conventional advice about self-care and setting boundaries barely scratches the surface of the real solution. You'll discover the unseen connection between mental exhaustion and the subconscious mind, a connection that explains why some people can work 16-hour days and feel energized while others feel drained after just a few hours of mild effort. You'll learn specific techniques to recognize when this saboteur is operating in your life, and precise methods to neutralize its effects, not in months or years, but often within days or even hours. Most importantly, you'll understand why mental exhaustion isn't just a personal challenge, but the primary weapon used by what I've long called the negative influences, those forces that seek to keep individuals from achieving their full potential and purpose in life. I must warn you, what I'm about to share might contradict much of what you've been taught about productivity, rest, and mental health. Some of these concepts may initially seem counterintuitive or challenge your current belief system. That's precisely why they work when conventional approaches fail. This knowledge has transformed the lives of countless individuals. I've personally counseled from presidents and captains of industry to everyday Americans seeking to break free from invisible limitations. Today, these same principles can liberate you from the disguised saboteur that has been silently stealing your energy, your ambition, and ultimately, your destiny. Before we continue, if you find value in these insights about overcoming mental exhaustion, consider subscribing to this channel. I've dedicated my life to understanding the principles of success, and I intend to share them all with you, one video at a time. Now, let us pull back the curtain and expose this saboteur for what it truly is, not an inevitable condition of modern life, but a disguise worn by the very forces seeking to prevent your greatness. Are you ready to see beyond the disguise? Let's begin. Let me speak plainly about this silent epidemic that's robbing America and perhaps you personally of its greatest potential. Mental exhaustion has become so pervasive that we've normalized it. "I'm just tired" has become the reflexive response when asked how we're doing. But this isn't merely tiredness, it's something far more dangerous. The mental exhaustion I'm referring to manifests as that persistent fog that clouds your thinking. It's that heaviness that makes even small decisions feel overwhelming. It's the mysterious force that transforms your once burning ambition into a dim flicker that barely survives the demands of daily life. Most troublingly, it's the invisible barrier that stands between you and the vision you once held for your life with such clarity and conviction. What makes this saboteur particularly dangerous is how it disguises itself as reasonable limitation. "I can't possibly start that business because I'm already stretched thin. I'll pursue that opportunity next year when things calm down. I need to rest tonight instead of working on my dream." Each statement sounds rational, responsible even, yet each represents the saboteur speaking through you, using the language of self-care to keep you confined within the borders of mediocrity. I once counseled a brilliant engineer in Detroit who had invented a manufacturing process that could have revolutionized his industry. When I asked why he hadn't developed it further, he gave me a dozen perfectly logical reasons: too busy with existing work, family obligations, economic uncertainty. But when we dug deeper, the truth emerged. Mental exhaustion had convinced him that his limitations were fixed realities rather than temporary conditions to be overcome. The conventional wisdom about mental exhaustion has failed us spectacularly. We're told to simply rest more, take vacations, practice self-care. Yet Americans are taking more vacation days than ever before while reporting higher levels of mental fatigue. The average person spends hours on relaxing activities that somehow leave them feeling more depleted. Something doesn't add up. Here's what the majority fails to understand. Mental exhaustion is not primarily physical in nature. It is not merely the result of doing too much. If it were, then the hardest physical laborers would be the most mentally exhausted. Yet, I've interviewed coal miners who work back-breaking shifts and return home with their minds clear and spirits high, while corporate executives who sit in comfortable chairs all day collapse into their homes feeling like their brains have been put through a wringer. The true nature of mental exhaustion is far more complex and far more tied to your subconscious patterns than most experts recognize. Consider these revealing patterns I've observed across thousands of case studies. Those who report the highest levels of mental exhaustion often spend the most time consuming negative news and engaging in critical social comparison. Their minds are constantly processing threats, inadequacies, and worst-case scenarios. Individuals who feel chronically depleted typically spend large portions of their days in what I call half-commitment, neither fully engaged in work nor fully present in rest, living in a draining middle ground where the mind never experiences either the satisfaction of achievement or the replenishment of true relaxation. The mentally exhausted frequently maintain internal thought patterns characterized by excessive self-judgment, rehashing past events, in anxious anticipation of future challenges, mental processes that consume enormous energy while producing no valuable outcomes. Perhaps most tellingly, those suffering most severely from mental exhaustion often report feeling that their daily activities lack meaningful purpose. They're expending energy without the revitalizing effect of knowing their efforts contribute to something larger than themselves. The majority approach to addressing mental exhaustion treats only the symptoms while ignoring these deeper causes. It's like trying to empty a flooding basement with buckets while ignoring the broken pipe. You might remove some water temporarily, but the source of the problem remains untouched. This explains why conventional solutions provide such temporary relief. A vacation might help briefly, but within days of returning to work, the exhaustion floods back. Meditation might create momentary calm, but the benefits evaporate when confronting the same thought patterns that created the exhaustion initially. Exercise might boost energy temporarily, but cannot compensate for a life drained of purpose and direction. What separates the minority who maintain remarkable mental energy despite demanding lives? I've studied them closely, the Thomas Edisons who could work for days on end with sustained concentration, the Eleanor Roosevelts who managed complex diplomatic challenges while maintaining inner calm, the everyday achievers who accomplish more by noon than others do all day without the constant complaint of exhaustion. These exceptional individuals aren't superhuman. They don't have special genes that exempt them from fatigue. What they possess is an understanding, whether intuitive or learned, of how to recognize and neutralize the saboteur of mental exhaustion before it can take hold. I've watched a factory worker with a third-grade education apply these principles and transform not only his energy levels but his entire life trajectory within months. I've seen chronically exhausted physicians become rejuvenated after implementing these methods. Despite maintaining the same demanding schedules, the difference wasn't in what they were doing, but in how they were thinking about what they were doing. The reality most people never confront is this: mental exhaustion is often not the result of your circumstances, but the result of how your mind interprets and processes those circumstances. It is, in essence, a problem of perception rather than reality. Consider two individuals facing identical workloads, identical pressures, identical challenges. One collapses under the weight of exhaustion while the other thrives and expands. The difference lies not in their external conditions but in the internal landscape of their minds. This understanding that mental exhaustion is primarily a pattern of thought rather than an inevitable result of activity is both liberating and challenging. Liberating because it means the solution lies within your control. Challenging because it removes the comfort of blaming your circumstances for your limitations. As we move forward, I'll reveal the precise mechanisms through which mental exhaustion operates as a saboteur, and more importantly, the specific methods to transform your relationship with mental energy entirely. But first, you must be willing to consider that much of what you currently believe about your own limitations may in fact be the very disguise this saboteur wears to maintain its control over your life and potential. After spending over 20 years interviewing the most accomplished individuals across America and studying the hidden mechanics of achievement, I discovered something remarkable about mental energy that few understand. It operates according to different laws than physical energy. While physical energy depletes with use, mental energy can actually expand through certain types of engagement while depleting through others. This insight forms the foundation of the approach I'm about to share with you. What I've come to understand is that mental exhaustion is not merely a condition but a mechanism, one that serves the specific purpose of preventing you from reaching your full potential. It is, in essence, the primary tool used by what I've long called the enemy within, that aspect of your mind resistant to growth, change, and accomplishment. My research into the science of personal achievement has revealed that the human mind contains a remarkable power plant capable of generating virtually unlimited mental energy when properly aligned. Yet most people are attempting to operate this sophisticated machinery without understanding its fundamental principles, like trying to drive an automobile without knowing how an engine works. I remember sitting in Andrew Carnegie's office in 1908 when he first challenged me to undertake my lifelong study of success principles. "Hill," he said, leaning forward in his chair, "the average man taps less than 10% of his mental capacity. Not because he lacks ability, but because he doesn't understand how his own mind functions. He's like a man dying of thirst while sitting beside a covered well." This analogy has proven remarkably accurate in my decades of research, since the well of mental energy exists within you, but it has been concealed deliberately by mechanisms designed to keep you operating at a fraction of your potential. What I'm offering is not another set of temporary coping strategies or superficial productivity hacks. I'm proposing a fundamental reconfiguration of how you understand and manage mental energy, an approach derived from studying those rare individuals who maintain extraordinary mental vitality despite demands that would crush the average person. The methodology I've developed doesn't require you to dramatically change your circumstances, reduce your workload, or retreat from life's challenges. Rather, it teaches you to operate with a fundamentally different relationship to thought itself, to recognize and neutralize the specific thought patterns that create exhaustion while amplifying those that generate energy. I call this approach mental energy mastery, and its principles have transformed the lives of countless individuals who were once trapped in cycles of chronic exhaustion, underachievement, and diminishing returns on their mental efforts. Take the case of Mrs. Eleanor Wilkins, a school teacher from Portland who came to me in 1935 completely depleted, ready to abandon her beloved profession due to overwhelming exhaustion. After applying these principles for just 3 weeks, she reported not only a complete reversal of her fatigue, but an expansion of capacity that allowed her to develop an innovative teaching program that eventually spread throughout her entire school district. Her circumstances hadn't changed, her relationship to mental energy had. Or consider Robert Thornton, a sales executive who'd been prescribed stimulants by his doctor to combat his chronic mental fatigue. Within a month of implementing the mental energy mastery principles, he had not only discontinued the medication, but had broken company sales records that had stood for 15 years. For the first time, he wrote to me, "I understand that exhaustion wasn't my natural state, it was an imposter stealing my birthright to vitality and achievement. These transformations may seem extraordinary, but they are merely the natural result of aligning with laws of mental energy that have always existed but remained hidden from common understanding. Let me be clear, what I'm about to share isn't widely known because it contradicts many comfortable assumptions about human limitation. The idea that your mental capacity might be virtually unlimited, that exhaustion is often optional rather than inevitable, is threatening to those invested in seeing themselves and others as fundamentally limited. This knowledge has been preserved and practiced by a relatively small circle of achievers. Throughout history, individuals who discovered either through intuition or guidance that the conventional understanding of mental energy was fundamentally flawed. Now, for perhaps the first time, I'm laying out this approach in its complete form, revealing how the saboteur of mental exhaustion operates and precisely how to neutralize its effects in your life. What you're about to learn isn't speculation or theory. It's the distilled wisdom from thousands of case studies, hundreds of interviews with exceptional achievers, and decades of personal experimentation and refinement. These principles have been tested in the laboratory of real life, applied successfully across diverse circumstances, professions, and personalities. The path I'm about to outline will require you to challenge fundamental assumptions about your own limitations. It will ask you to consider that the exhaustion you've accepted as normal might actually be an unnecessary condition maintained by specific thought patterns you can identify and transform. Most importantly, it will invite you to step into a fundamentally different relationship with your own mental capacity, one where energy expands to meet worthy demands rather than depleting in the face of challenge. Are you prepared to recognize and overcome the disguise that your greatest saboteur has been wearing? Then let us proceed to the core principles that will transform your understanding of mental energy forever. The foundation of mastering mental energy begins with understanding that your mind operates according to laws as definite as those governing electricity or gravity. Just as electricity flows according to specific principles regardless of whether you understand them, these laws of mental energy operate in your life whether you recognize them or not. The difference is that once you understand these laws, you can align with them rather than unconsciously working against them. The first fundamental principle is what I call the law of mental polarity. Every thought you entertain carries with it either a generative charge that creates energy or a depleting charge that consumes it. This isn't metaphorical, it's literal. Certain thought patterns literally generate mental energy while others consume it. Regardless of the apparent importance or severity of the subject matter, consider how a person can spend hours engaged in creative work and emerge energized, while 15 minutes of worry about the same project can leave them completely drained. The subject matter is identical, but the thought pattern, the mental polarity, is entirely different. This explains the puzzling phenomenon of the executive, who sits in air-conditioned comfort making decisions all day yet collapses from exhaustion, while the construction worker doing physical labor in the hot sun returns home mentally fresh. The executive's thought patterns may be predominantly depleting in nature, while the laborers are generative or neutral. Imagine your mind as a magnificent garden. Depleting thoughts are like weeds that not only take up space but actively extract nutrients from the soil, while generative thoughts are like fruit-bearing plants that contribute to the garden's abundance. The problem is that most people have never learned to distinguish between these two types of mental activity. They treat all thinking as the same, then wonder why they feel constantly drained. Let me illustrate this with a story about two brothers I once counseled in Cleveland. Both ran similar businesses, faced similar challenges, and worked similarly long hours. Yet one complained constantly of mental fatigue while the other maintained remarkable vitality. When I observed them closely, the difference became clear. The exhausted brother spent approximately 60% of his mental energy on what I call circular thinking, revisiting problems without resolution, imagining worst-case scenarios, questioning decisions already made, and mentally defending himself against criticisms not yet received. His energetic brother, by contrast, engaged almost exclusively in what I call linear thinking, addressing each challenge once, making decisions definitively, focusing on solutions rather than problems, and projecting positive outcomes rather than fearful scenarios. Though they appeared to be doing the same work, their internal mental landscapes were as different as a turbulent sea and a calm lake. After teaching the exhausted brother to recognize and redirect his circular thinking patterns, his energy transformed within weeks, not because his circumstances changed, but because the mental polarity of his thought patterns shifted from predominantly depleting to predominantly generative. This brings us to the second principle, the law of mental rhythm. Your mind naturally functions according to rhythms of engagement and disengagement, focus and diffusion, intense directed thought and open receptivity. When you violate these natural rhythms, as most Americans do consistently, you create a state of mental friction that rapidly depletes energy. Imagine trying to drive your automobile by holding the accelerator and brake simultaneously. The engine would strain, parts would wear prematurely, and fuel would be wasted, generating heat rather than motion. Yet, this is precisely how most people operate their minds, never fully engaged in the present activity nor fully disengaged to allow restoration, but caught in a depleting middle ground where the mind cannot function according to its natural design. I observed this principle in action while studying the work habits of Thomas Edison at his laboratory in New Jersey. What fascinated me wasn't just Edison's capacity for sustained focus, but his ability to shift into complete mental relaxation between periods of intense concentration. He would work with absolute absorption for hours, then recline in his chair and enter what appeared to be a state between wakefulness and sleep for brief periods, emerging refreshed and ready to resume his efforts. He wasn't fighting his mind's natural rhythm, but working in harmony with it. This pattern appears consistently among individuals with extraordinary mental endurance. They don't maintain a steady, moderate level of mental engagement throughout the day. Rather, they alternate between periods of complete, undistracted focus and periods of genuine mental renewal. They are either fully on or appropriately off, rarely existing in the depleting middle ground where most people spend their entire workday. Consider your own experience. Have you ever noticed how 2 hours of concentrated, undistracted work often accomplishes more than 8 hours of fragmented attention? Or how 15 minutes of genuine mental relaxation can restore clarity that no amount of pushing through can achieve? This isn't coincidence, it's the law of mental rhythm in action. The third principle is perhaps the most profound, the law of mental resonance. Your mind naturally resonates with, and eventually conforms to, whatever thoughts you consistently entertain. This creates either an upward spiral of increasing energy and capacity, or a downward spiral of depletion and limitation. Imagine dropping a pebble into a still pond. The ripples expand outward, affecting the entire surface. Similarly, every thought you entertain creates ripples through your mental and emotional state, affecting your energy, perception, and ultimately your reality. Entertain thoughts of limitation, failure, or fear consistently, and your mental energy system begins to organize around these thoughts, creating a resonance pattern that perpetuates and amplifies them. I witnessed this principle dramatically demonstrated in the life of a promising young attorney in Washington who had developed such a strong resonance with anxiety and anticipated failure that he began experiencing physical symptoms of exhaustion despite being in excellent physical health. His mind had literally configured itself to align with his predominant thoughts, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of depletion. After teaching him specific techniques to interrupt this resonance pattern and intentionally establish resonance with thoughts of capability, purpose, and positive expectation, his transformation was remarkable. Within a month, not only had his energy completely returned, but he reported accessing levels of mental clarity and capacity he hadn't experienced since college. The key insight here is that mental exhaustion is often not about how much energy you've expended, but about which thought patterns you've allowed your mind to resonate with. The mind that resonates predominantly with purpose, possibility, and power naturally generates energy, while the mind resonating with limitation, fear, and past failures consistently depletes it. The fourth principle integrates all the others, the law of mental dominion. This law states simply that you have the inherent ability to direct your mind rather than being directed by it. Most people live in unconscious submission to their mental patterns, believing that their thoughts are either automatic responses to circumstances or accurate reflections of reality. Both assumptions are fundamentally incorrect. Your thoughts are instruments that can be directed, tools that can be employed for specific purposes, just as you wouldn't allow a hammer to randomly strike whatever it pleased in your home. You need not allow your thoughts to wander wherever habitual patterns might take them. This capacity for mental governance, for dominion over your own thought processes, is what separates the mentally energized from the chronically exhausted. I recall a remarkable demonstration of this principle during my interview with Andrew Carnegie. A messenger interrupted our meeting with news that would have devastated many men, a major business setback representing a significant financial loss. Carnegie read the message, paused momentarily, then set it aside and resumed our conversation with the same energy and focus as before. Later, when I asked about this, he explained, "Hill, I decided long ago which thoughts deserved my mental energy. A setback is merely information requiring action, not a tragedy requiring emotional depletion. That choice where to direct my mental resources has been worth millions to me, both in dollars and in life force. This, perhaps more than any other factor, explains why some individuals maintain extraordinary mental energy regardless of circumstances, while others are depleted by the mildest challenges. The former have developed mental dominion, the ability to consciously direct their thought patterns rather than being directed by them. These four principles, mental polarity, mental rhythm, mental resonance, and mental dominion, form the foundation of mastering mental energy. They explain why conventional approaches to exhaustion fail and why the solution must address not just your activities but the fundamental relationship between your conscious mind and your thought patterns. What have you found most revealing about these principles so far? Leave a comment below about which concept resonates most strongly with your experience. Your insight might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear to begin their own transformation. Now that we've established these fundamental principles, let's address the natural questions and objections that might be arising in your mind. As you consider these principles of mental energy, your practical mind may already be raising objections. This is natural and even valuable. The questioning mind is often the one most prepared for transformation. Let me address the most common concerns directly. But Napoleon, you might be thinking, my exhaustion feels physical, not mental. I can physically feel the fatigue in my body, the heaviness in my limbs, the fog in my brain. How can this simply be a matter of thought patterns? This is perhaps the most common misconception about mental exhaustion. The belief that because we experienced it physically, it must have primarily physical causes. Yet modern science increasingly confirms what I observed in my research decades ago. The mind and body are inseparable aspects of a single system. Thoughts create immediate physiological changes throughout your body, altering hormone levels, blood flow, muscle tension, and even cellular activity. When you entertain depleting thought patterns consistently, your body responds accordingly, creating physical sensations of fatigue that feel entirely real, because they are real physical conditions created by your mental patterns. This explains why a shift in mental focus can create an immediate surge of energy, even when nothing is changed in your physical circumstances. Have you ever noticed how quickly exhaustion can vanish when something sufficiently exciting or important suddenly demands your attention? The parent who felt too tired to move can find remarkable energy when their child is in danger. The entrepreneur who is mentally depleted can become instantly alert when a major opportunity presents itself. This isn't coincidence, it's evidence of the mind's primary role in energy creation and depletion. But what about genuinely demanding circumstances, you might ask? Some situations truly do require enormous mental energy. Are you suggesting exhaustion is never justified? This question reflects a misunderstanding of these principles. The issue isn't whether demands on your mental energy are real or justified. Of course they are. The question is whether your response to those demands creates unnecessary depletion through inefficient mental patterns. Consider two military generals planning the same complex campaign. One works methodically, addressing each challenge once, making clear decisions, maintaining confidence in his strategy, and resting fully when not working. The other revisits the same problems repeatedly, second-guesses his own decisions, imagines countless failure scenarios, and never mentally disengages from the campaign even during rest periods. Both face identical external demands, but the second general might experience 10 times the mental exhaustion of the first. The difference isn't in their circumstances, but in how their minds process those circumstances. But some people naturally have more energy than others. You might protest, surely there are inherent differences in mental capacity between individuals. This objection contains a partial truth but misses the larger reality. While natural temperament and physical vitality certainly vary between individuals, research consistently shows that mental energy management has far greater impact on your experienced energy level than these inherent differences. I've worked with individuals across the spectrum of natural temperaments, from the naturally vigorous to the constitutionally sensitive, and observed that proper application of these principles transforms energy levels regardless of starting point. The naturally vigorous person with poor mental energy management will soon find themselves depleted, while the constitutionally sensitive person who masters these principles often discovers reservoirs of energy they never imagined possible. This all sounds good in theory, you might think, but in my real-world circumstances, with my responsibilities and pressures, how practical is this approach? This skepticism is the mind's natural resistance to new paradigms, yet the principles I'm describing weren't developed in a philosophical vacuum, but through studying individuals operating under tremendous real-world pressure, presidents making wartime decisions, industrialists navigating economic collapse, parents raising children while building businesses, innovators pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible. These weren't people with easy lives who could afford to engage in abstract mental exercises. They were individuals who discovered, often through necessity, that mental energy management was the difference between collapse and triumph amidst life's greatest challenges. The question isn't whether you face real demands, of course you do. The question is whether you want to meet those demands with the maximum mental energy possible, or continue to be unnecessarily depleted by inefficient thought patterns. Perhaps you're wondering, if this approach is so effective, why isn't it more widely taught and practiced? This question gets to the heart of why mental exhaustion remains so prevalent despite our increasing knowledge about the mind. The principles I'm sharing require something that has become increasingly rare in our instant gratification culture: mental self-discipline and the willingness to take full responsibility for your internal state regardless of external circumstances. It's far more comfortable to blame our exhaustion on our schedules, our responsibilities, or our environments than to recognize it as substantially self-created through our mental patterns. The principles that create extraordinary mental energy demand that we abandon the role of victim, even the socially acceptable victim of modern life's demands, and assume complete responsibility for our mental state. Are you ready to consider that the mental exhaustion you've accepted as inevitable might actually be optional? That the limitations you've attributed to your circumstances might actually be created by your relationship to those circumstances? These are challenging questions, but they open the door to possibilities that most will never explore. Understanding these principles individually is valuable, but their true power emerges when you integrate them into a cohesive system for managing mental energy. Like the gears of a finely crafted watch, each principle works in harmony with the others to create a self-sustaining cycle of mental vitality rather than depletion. Let me offer a unifying metaphor that brings these concepts together. Your mind is like a powerful river that can either power the mill of achievement or overflow its banks and create the flood of exhaustion. The principles we've discussed represent the mechanisms for channeling this river, directing its flow, maintaining its banks, and harnessing its power for constructive purposes rather than allowing it to dissipate its force across the landscape of scattered attention. Mental polarity determines the quality of the water itself, whether it carries nutrients that enrich everything it touches or toxins that deplete the surrounding ecosystem. Mental rhythm governs the healthy flow of the river, the natural alternation between powerful currents and calm pools that maintains the river's health. Mental resonance determines which tributaries flow into your river, either strengthening its flow or contaminating its waters. And mental dominion represents your role as the river's steward, directing its course rather than being swept away by its current. When these principles work in harmony, they create what I call the achiever's energy cycle, a self-reinforcing pattern that generates more mental energy than it consumes. Even during periods of intense activity, this cycle begins with directing your attention exclusively toward generative thought patterns, those focused on solutions, possibilities, and purposeful action. This activates the law of mental polarity to create rather than consume energy. As you maintain this focus, you naturally align with productive mental rhythms, engaging fully with the task at hand and then disengaging completely for renewal, avoiding the depleting middle ground of partial attention. This rhythm establishes positive mental resonance, training your mind to align with thoughts of capability, purpose, and achievement rather than limitation, worry, and defeat. As this resonance strengthens, your capacity for mental dominion grows. You gain greater ability to direct your thought patterns consciously rather than reacting habitually to circumstances. The result is an upward spiral where each element reinforces the others. Greater mental dominion allows you to maintain generative thought patterns more consistently. These patterns create more energy through proper polarity. This energy allows you to maintain healthier mental rhythms. These rhythms strengthen positive resonance, and this resonance further enhances your mental dominion. To implement this integrated approach in your daily life, I recommend a simple but powerful three-part action plan. First, become a vigilant observer of your thought patterns. Several times each day, pause and ask, is my current thinking generating or depleting mental energy? Simply bringing awareness to the polarity of your thoughts begins the transformation process. Most people are shocked to discover how much time they spend in depleting thought patterns they've never questioned or even noticed. Second, implement what I call full engagement cycles in your work, rather than maintaining moderate focus for extended periods. Commit to cycles of complete concentration followed by brief periods of genuine renewal. Even 15 minutes of absolute, undistracted focus on a single task followed by 2 minutes of complete mental disengagement will yield greater results and energy than an hour of partial attention. This aligns you with the law of mental rhythm. Third, consciously curate your mental environment to establish resonance with achievement and possibility. Limit exposure to chronic complainers and negative influences. Study biographies of great achievers. Surround yourself with evidence of human potential rather than human limitation. Most importantly, monitor your self-talk, the internal conversation that constantly shapes your mental resonance. This three-part approach, awareness of thought polarity, rhythm-based work cycles, and conscious creation of positive resonance provides a practical framework for applying these principles immediately in your life. The beauty of this system is that it doesn't require you to change your external circumstances, reduce your responsibilities, or work fewer hours. It simply asks you to engage with your existing activities in a fundamentally different way. I've seen individuals implement this approach while maintaining the exact same schedule and responsibilities, yet experience a complete transformation in their mental energy within days or weeks. The change wasn't in what they were doing, but in how they were thinking about what they were doing. This integrated approach directly counters the saboteur's favorite disguise. Mental exhaustion can no longer hide behind the mask of normal fatigue. When you recognize the specific thought patterns creating it, the saboteur can no longer claim your circumstances are to blame when you witness firsthand how your relationship to those circumstances transforms your energy. With this integrated understanding, you now possess what few ever discover, the ability to generate rather than merely conserve mental energy, but knowledge alone is insufficient. The principles must be applied with consistency and conviction to create lasting transformation. The knowledge I've shared with you today represents the dividing line between those who accept mental exhaustion as an inevitable condition of modern life and those who recognize it as a disguise worn by the saboteur of human potential. The question now before you is clear. Which side of this line will you choose to stand on? This choice between accepting limitation and claiming your birthright to extraordinary mental energy must be made anew each day, sometimes each hour. The saboteur does not retreat permanently after a single defeat. It watches vigilantly for moments of unconsciousness, stress, or doubt to reassert its influence through the familiar disguise of necessary exhaustion. The time for implementation is not tomorrow or next week, or when your circumstances become more favorable. The precise moment to begin is now in this exact instant, by making a fundamental decision about your relationship to your own mental energy. Are you willing to consider that the exhaustion you've accepted as normal might actually be optional? Are you prepared to take complete responsibility for your mental state regardless of external pressures or demands? Will you commit to observing your thought patterns with new awareness, identifying and redirecting those that deplete rather than generate energy? The cost of delay is far greater than most realize. Every day spent in unnecessary mental exhaustion is a day of diminished impact, restricted creativity, and limited joy. It's a day where your contributions to your work, your family, and your world are a fraction of what they could be. More significantly, it's another day where the saboteur's disguise becomes more convincing, more difficult to recognize as the imposter it truly is. I'm reminded of a letter I received from a businessman in Atlanta who had implemented these principles after years of chronic mental fatigue. "Mr. Hill," he wrote, "my only regret is the years I lost believing my exhaustion was inevitable, a natural consequence of my responsibilities. I now accomplish more in a day than I previously managed in a week, with energy left to truly engage with my family and pursuits that matter to me. The tragedy isn't how tired I was, but that I accepted this condition as normal for so long." Don't let this be your story. Don't allow another day to pass, reinforcing the mental patterns that create unnecessary depletion. The saboteur thrives on procrastination, on the human tendency to postpone transformation until some imagined future when circumstances are more favorable. Begin today by implementing the three-part action plan I've outlined. Become aware of the polarity of your thoughts. Establish healthy mental rhythms in your work. Consciously create resonance with achievement and possibility. These simple but powerful steps, applied consistently, will initiate the upward spiral of the achiever's energy cycle in your life. Remember, mental exhaustion is not your natural state. It is the disguise worn by the forces seeking to limit your impact and achievement. By recognizing this disguise and implementing the principles we've discussed, you reclaim not just your energy, but your rightful capacity for extraordinary accomplishment. The choice before you is simple but profound. Will you continue to accept the saboteur's favorite disguise as an inevitable condition? Or will you claim the mental vitality that is your natural birthright? Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for perfect circumstances. Begin now. Your potential is too valuable to remain hostage to unnecessary exhaustion for even one more day. If this message has resonated with you, subscribe to this channel and share your insights in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what another viewer needs to begin their own transformation. Together, we can expose the saboteur's favorite disguise and reclaim the extraordinary mental energy that is our natural inheritance.